Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Madeline Bocaro. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
It is. Who is an author, a blogger, and also you've done some journalism as well in the past as well.
Yeah. Yes, I have.
So the reason why you came to my attention is twofold, really. Number one is that actually, yeah, it's twofold. Is because number one, you've released a book that is fantastic, which is a great book about Yoko Ono. The very almost, yeah, your book does a good job of actually doing exactly what it needs to, which is to take away the mystique in a sense and the wrong opinions that people have or ideas that people have of Yoko. And I'm one of those people who has a fascination with that, and there's 3 albums by her particularly that I think are incredible albums and up there with a lot of classic albums. So that's one thing that really brought you to my attention. And then the fact that you've been on the show with Kristen, the Rock and Roll Survivors as well, which is it's a fantastic podcast. It's a great show.
Yeah, Kristen's very insightful. She's a wonderful interviewer, and she's doing a lot for women in music and in journalism and any facet. So I really appreciate her.
I'm just going to change internet. Hold on. Okay, that's worked. So for some unknown reason, my laptop's connected to somebody else's internet on this street. Don't know why, but now it's back to normal. But yeah, Kristen's show, I loved that. The fact that she's talking with Patty, because being a Brit, we're used to the Susie, Patty's sister, and her career, and so that intrigued me. But then when I looked at your blog as well, your blogs that you do, the posts that you do, they're fascinating because to me, it captures you're doing reviews of it's reviews and sort of like an overall look at different artists and people, pop culture people, classic people, like we were speaking before we started, Sly Stone, who I now own the autobiography of on an ebook, so I can't show it to people on the screen and go, there you go, which is awful for me because I love doing that, as every podcaster does when they've got video. But then you have other items on there about craft work. There's a fantastic write-up about radioactive or radioactivity, and one of the great bands, incredible they are. But all these acts that anyway, we'll pull it back. So get yourself together, Marv. So going back to 1967, August the 18th, that was when you saw that infamous picture or that famous picture of Yoko in Time magazine with Yoko in front of the promo picture of her in front of a picture of from her album, a film at the time, Bottoms.
She had just done that film, and it said Japanese artist Yoko Ono in front of her film, and it was a Bottoms walking on a treadmill pretty much in close-up. Yeah. So I was a kid, I was about 10 years old, and I just thought, whoa, this is really cool. It's an adult doing something really kooky, and all the adults in my life were pretty strict and serious, and I was an only child, and I was looking for kind of a imaginary friend or older sister, and I was like, oh, I love this girl. So, and the picture of her was mischievous. She had a little smile, and I was like, this is great, and I saved it, and I said, I gotta find out what she's up to or who she is. And then pretty soon after, in 1968, the Beatles' White Album came out, and she was with John Lennon. And I'm like, that's her. Oh my God, this is great. And I guess they had done Two Virgins, which I hadn't heard about being a 10-year-old kid, but I later got that one with the naked album cover. But yeah, once she got together with John, I started collecting everything about her, listening to everything she ever said, watching the bed-ins as they unfolded, feeling like I was part of history in the making, and just appreciating their sincerity, their humor, and just striving toward world peace. Really, they picked a topic to work on together, and it was a huge one, but it was an important one, and I think they did pretty well considering the backlash they consistently got. But they were really like family to me. They were fun to watch. Them in the news every single day, running through airports, planting acorns,
Yep.
doing the war is over posters, doing concerts. They never stopped. It was great.
Well, with their relationship, the two of them, it's similar in a sense to me looking from the outside to the relationship that Paul had with Linda, and you'll see where I'm going to with this shortly. That Paul would had with Linda, that George would have eventually with Olivia, and then Ringo would have eventually with Barbara, where they both were they sort of like they work together as they influence each other, and they're equal to each other, yes, and they have their own almost talents of their own. Not talents, I don't know about that, but they work with each other essentially. Their abilities do so Yoko is very creative,
Right,
as is
right.
John,
There's a
and
comparison.
the creativity inspires each other, and they make each other better. That's what I was going to say. In these couples, they make each other better.
Exactly. As a comparison I made where there were two intelligent women who went to Sarah Lawrence College, had a
Yep.
young daughter, was previously married, married a Beatle, encouraged her husband to form another band after the Beatles, and nourished him. They were together 24/7 for decades, and this was their soulmate. And that is exactly describing Linda and Yoko.
Yep.
But one of them gets hell for marrying John, and the other one, she wasn't treated so nicely either, but she's not pictured as a devil. So
No.
it's all they, and then even with George and Olivia, she was very spiritual. They had that spiritual connection. And so did John and Yoko. Yoko is a very spiritual person, and she relied upon her own wisdom and the wisdom of astrologers, tarot readers, numerologists, directionalists, and she was really in tune with all of that. And she really helped John to be himself. She freed him in a lot of ways. She encouraged his creativity, and they nourished each other, because if either of them hadn't met each other, I don't think either of them would have survived that well or been happy at all.
No. No. But so you discovered that, and from there you had this. You've mentioned in your book and in quite a few interviews on podcasts and shows, you've mentioned about then she became this sort of imaginary friend that you had, and eventually you took that from there and you started communicating with her by letter as well over the
Right.
years,
Yeah, when
and
they
getting
first
letters
moved into
back.
when they moved into the Dakota, I was like, oh my God, I have an address. So I wrote her, and it was around the time she was doing performances at this nightclub in the city. And I was only about 12 or 13 at the time, and I couldn't get in. So I was writing to her, oh, I'm here now, I'm listening to your album, even though I can't be at the concert. And I really, really want to be there, but I love this song and I love the meaning of this. And she wrote back, and then I kept writing, and then I stopped after a while because they were separated, and then they got back together, and I didn't want to bother them. But then after John was killed, a friend of mine told me, I think Yoko needs to meet you. I've been writing to her again, maybe after from 1981 to 1984 or 5. And my friend took me down there to the Dakota, and I said, okay, we're going to go on her birthday, so she knows we're there for her. I don't want to think I'm a Beatle fan hanging around. So we did that, and she came out within seconds. And I gave her a present and we talked, and she told her who I was with the letters, and she, oh my God, it's you. And she said, I'm having this exhibition of John's artwork next week. You should come to this, you should come to that. And she would send me invites to these things. And over the time, I spent lots of moments with her backstage, and she really appreciated the fact that I loved her work and her music, and always had something to say about it, or understood some little gem. She always said, I was thinking the same thing. I was wondering if you would notice it. So she was really, really thrilled to have someone into her work.
Yeah. So do you think that your way in that sense, in a way, is because you your knowledge of Yoko came before the knowledge of her being with John, essentially? So for a lot of people, the way that they look at it, the first time that they would have seen they would have noticed Yoko Ono would be because she got married to John, or she was in a relationship before that with John. So perhaps you have a better understanding of it because of the fact that you've come from that, knowing her before that.
Yeah, probably. And I was even young at that time. I was in my 20s, and she knew as a young kid, and she was appreciative that I had followed her for so long, and that I knew the artwork and got it, and we could joke about it. And yeah, she was thrilled about that. And I never really spoke about Beatles with her or John somewhat, but yeah, it was all about her for me.
That's great. Because something else that comes across a lot really well in the book is, and I like this, is the fact that it shows Yoko as, I think it's there from the beginning when you mentioned the picture of her doing the promo for Bottoms, for instance. And in there you get this sense of, yeah, there's that sort of like knowing, sort of almost humorous side to her about it, but it's in a very innocent way. It's not anything else. It's just her being innocent and just thinking, it's this is just what it is. It's just people's bottoms,
It's
and
normal.
that's what it
We're
is.
only
Else to
born
it.
this way.
Everybody's got one and all
Well,
that.
that's the
And there's
part of
that
it.
natural innocence to her that comes across through your book really well.
Yeah, it just felt like she never really had any ulterior motives other than to make people smile and laugh, although she wasn't even aware of that element of her. She was very serious artist,
Yeah.
but she threw these little elements in, maybe to like warm people up to her a little, which it took a long time for that to happen. But there was this Zen joke humor. It wasn't like ha ha comedian. It was
Yeah.
just the underlying little, yeah, I get it, that she was going for. But she was also really about healing people, and showing us our misplaced values, and educating us to the fact that water is more valuable than gold, or art shouldn't be entertainment. It should be helping you to gain or to understand something, and not just something you hang on the wall and admire. It's an action. You should really use art. Anybody is an artist. Anybody can communicate in this way. It's a very effective tool, and you can use it on any level: political, healing, any kind of level. It's the only great tool of communication.
But I think that's something that attracted, I can understand how that would be attractive to John in a sense as well, because he's an artist in his own right. And you could, if he could see that in her work, he could see the bit of humor, for instance, and also the taking down of, because there's a certain, with art and painting and all different forms of art, they can get to a stage where there's the artist and there's you, and but
It's
all that's
pretentious
taken,
in a
yeah,
way.
this, yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas with Yoko's work and with John, the way that John worked as well, they take away all of that pretense, and so it's, you're on a level field, you as the person admiring the art and the artists themselves.
You're
And
interacting, you're on the ladder, climbing the ladder to see the painting, you're
yeah,
hammering a nail, you're, watching the apple. It's all for you. It's not just looking down on you.
No, he's not looking down. There's no condescending in there. To the thing of, I've always said one of the things I really loved was the spyglass, where you go there and you look in the spyglass and there's this word and it just says yes. There, and there's the whole positivity of that, and that adds to the innocence and the fact that it's part of her. It's her own thoughts going there.
It's the
It's not, yeah.
positivity that John, it's the first thing John saw, her work, and he was drawn in, and he took that all the way up to mind games. Yes is the answer. A lot of that comes from her. Imagine comes from imagine, all the imaginations in her art, especially in her book Grapefruit. So he was heavily influenced by her and she by him, and they really merged, and she became a rock star, he became an artist. They melded.
But in that as well, over the years, the music that she released, I always thought that that was an interesting side to the relationship, whereby John would release. It's a lot of the times I like it when you've got the first instance of this would be that where they've done this that I'm about to say, because they went back all the way to the Two Virgins. That's where it all started there. But then when you've got, say, the Plastic Ono Band albums, you've got John's, which is very, yes, it's got a lot of bite to it and it's really raw. But at the same time as that, that's almost in a normal set way that he does music, essentially. That he'll just write the music, they perform the music, this, that, and the other. But on the other hand, if you take them both together and you've got Yoko's Plastic Ono Band, there's the more experimental side there that John's a part of as well. So I think that with what Yoko was doing there, allowed John and the other musicians to be a bit more, dare I say, avant-garde and experiment with music and push it and see where they can go. And it allowed them to enjoy the music rather than just be, we'll do this song, we'll do that song, we'll do that song. This is almost more like a Miles Davis of the 1970s feel, where you got this vibe. This is the basic nut of an idea, or the basic little thing of an idea, a bud. Take this bud and make a flower from it.
It just goes down to her own ideas of notation. One of her assignments in school was she's classically trained and she had to write notation. And when she was a child, the assignment was to transcribe the sound in musical notes, the sounds of the birds singing at dawn. And she found that was impossible because the bird sounds were just so natural and beautiful. You could never replicate that sound. So on the musical staff, she wrote with the accompaniment of the birds singing at dawn. So you have that in your head. You know what that sounds like. You don't have to read it off some paper. And that's what one of her first musical performances when Ornette Coleman had asked her to play with his quartet at the Royal Albert Hall. And she did the same thing. It was called emotion modulation. And she wrote out a little manifesto of how they should play. She said, forget what you learned. That's BS. Just go with pretend that you've gone through 10 years of suffering in silence and you haven't been able to say what you wanted. And now you can say it. And it goes like that. And she's giving them just this emotion to run with instead of musical notes. And that piece is on her first Plastic Ono Band album. And that other thing, the rest of the album really was John puts her with Klaus Voormann and Ringo and himself, and they jam and they play and they play and they play. And she wasn't necessarily making an album, but they put it together. Wow, look what we have here. And they used a lot of treatment on that. There was a lot of sampling, a lot of effects done on it. And when you hear the raw sessions, it's amazing what she did with it to make it sound so much more avant-garde. And their son Sean says about this record, she goes from not knowing anything about rock and roll to inventing punk rock. It's really hilarious. Music, I don't know if she would have gone into it at all had it not been for John. And then he gave her a beat. And once she had that beat, she started with the traditional songs and she made albums and albums of those.
Yeah.
So, and people didn't know that.
and she would grow as well as an artist from there, because from there you'll get the incredible albums Fly, and then Approximate Universe. I'm trying to remember the full title of it as well. That, but
The infinite.
thank you. But yes, they. So she's constantly, as an artist, growing in the music as well.
She is. And even though she has so many albums, double albums, she's done so many concerts, music is a fraction of her output. A fraction. She did so much artwork before John, after John, and in the middle, she's done so much for John's legacy. She put her whole art career on hold for almost 10 years to keep giving us different releases from John and put out his artwork and display it properly and get him known as an artist as well. So she was 33 when she met John. She's with him for 12 years, and she's over 40 years without him. So this is why my book had to be 550 pages. It's the first complete biography. Others will be coming out. They're going to be half the length. But every aspect of her life is so fascinating. I had to include all her ancestry, one of the wealthiest families in all of Japan at the time, billionaire banking family. So people say, oh, she was a gold digger. She went after John for his money. BS. Her parents were down on John. Anybody else would say, oh, a Beatle, get us tickets to the concert, but not them. They were embarrassed. They're like, who is this working class guy? They wanted some pedigreed Japanese billionaire to marry her. And she had to fight so much. She was in the middle of the war. She had to be evacuated as a child with her siblings, taking care of them. They were hungry. They were scared. They get back to Tokyo completely bombed out in ruins. Things she's experienced are so incredible. And this is what generated her art and what led her to John, the extreme loneliness. They were both suffering from parental abandonment. His left him completely. She didn't meet her father till she was almost 3 years old, because he was away in America working. And her mother was a socialite, elitist woman. And they both were craving understanding. And when they met, it just clicked.
Yeah, that's surprising in some ways that the family would be like that, but then not as well. It isn't as well. But Yoko's own history, coming from a family where you've got the Buddhist side of the family with the mother and the Christian side with the father. I think I've got that the right way around. Yep. So that's an interesting background to come from as well. But I also think that is something that it has always been in the back of her mind as well, as an inspiration for the work that she's put out as well, art wise, because I can see where there's that dichotomy of the two. Well, not so much, but where they meet essentially sometimes in the work that she puts out, where it is. I think it's allowed her to be more open to that, because her family were open to both and to anything in that way. I think it made her more open,
Well,
and
I
that
think
comes to artwork.
the Buddhism instilled in her the giving aspect. She's always, the cut piece, for example, was very Buddhist in nature. She wanted the audience to take what they wanted. And in a way, it was very dangerous because they were using a scissor to cut away the clothing. But she always said that nuns would understand it. It was just a format to give. And then the Christianity aspect, what she got was from that was the courage and conviction, and that stems in her painting To Be Stepped On, because that the root of that is from when they were persecuting Christians in the 14th century in Japan, and they were forcing them to step on a painting of Christ, and if they wouldn't step on it, they'd be executed. And most people just stepped on it, but some wouldn't. And she said, I would be the one that wouldn't, because I'm the one that's going to stand by my conviction. So she's got a little of both in there.
Yep, and even the bedding as well. You've got the almost Buddhist side there as well, or you got a bit of both there, because of it's pushing for, or it's promoting peace, but doing it in a way that isn't in your face. it's a way that is temperate and controlled, and it's almost laid back and a relaxed form of protest in
Right, a
essence.
surrender in a way. And
Yeah,
the white surroundings, the flag of surrender, like they did with the imaginary country of Newtopia that they
yep,
created. They just wanted the white in Yoko's world was just the purity, but also it was there for you to add something to it. And in the Bedin instance, it was to just give you a sense of calm because there was so much violence going on. They wanted to contrast that. And it was just very, very Buddhist to sit there and just take what came at them.
so you ended up becoming a journalist before or after? When did you? Okay, start again, Martin. So you met Yoko on her birthday, and then there's a wonderful one sentence in the book not far after that that is just beautiful, where Yoko said to you, and you're on about, you were going to go and see her on the, is it the Star Peace tour, and they were going to be, you were going to go to Japan to go
Oh
and
yeah,
see her there, I believe, and
yeah.
then it was cancelled, and she offered for you to stay with friends over there, even though it wasn't happening. And then
Right.
you said about, oh, something along the lines of, I couldn't impose, sort of thing. That's what we would probably say. And then Yoko came with that beautiful comeback, which was, you are family.
Oh, she was very open armed. And it's stunning to me, especially after what happened with John, that she could be so open with me. But again, I did understand it because she has a very strong intuition and she knows who's there for her, who's totally honest and who she could feel love and she can give it just as easily. So in one way it wasn't surprising, but in another way it was very inviting. And she was
So,
like that with everyone. Everyone who wrote to her pretty much got an answer. There was a girl that sent her a
yeah,
letter and said, John was killed on my birthday. And Yoko was like devastated. So she wrote back to the girl and said, don't think of this as a sad day. Think of it as the day John's soul was free to travel the universe. And she continued sending this girl a birthday card for decades on the
yes,
worst day of her own life. So this is Yoko. She's really a really giving, sweet, kind person. If you spend 5 minutes with her, you know why John loved her. And it just bothers me so much that the lies have been written and the lies are
yeah,
still being believed. And people have such vitriol. They're bottled up with anger about her and they need to let that go. It's not good for themselves and it's not good for anyone. It's all based on lies.
it is. But I knew I was going to say something there. But so, were you already at this point? Were you already working as a journalist at this point when you met? When you in 1985, you would have been.
Oh, about 26 or 27. But I started working as a journalist in 1978,
Okay.
right out of high school in a company called CMJ. It was called College Media Journal, and all the radio stations in America would report their playlists. And we would calculate that and we'd have reviews and concert reviews and all that. So it was great. I was in the middle of all that. I interviewed a lot of cool people. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And then my parents moved to Florida when I was 25 and I had to get a real job to support myself. So I do little reviews on the side and little pieces here and there, but you can't really make a living out of writing unless you're writing for Rolling Stone or something. And I want to write for them. I wanted
Yeah.
to write about the bands I loved. I didn't want any assignment to write about, let's say, the Go-Go's or something. I wanted to write about the things I grew up loving. And that's when I started eventually my blog, and I can just write all my memories of, there was a club in my hometown of Roslyn, Long Island, called My Father's Place. It wasn't my father's, it was called that. And I would go there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to catch people coming into sound check. And I met my idols. And it was so great because back then it was just so much freer. It was just a neighborhood club and they would say, yeah, come in. And I'd see the sound check and see the show and talk to the people and get to know them and interviewed some of them. So I have such valuable insight and information of the times. I've met Iggy Pop, Ian Hunter, Mick Ronson, Lou Reed, all like New York Dolls, Johnny Thunder, just everybody that I love, and or the Ramones. I got into the punk scene and interviewed those people, and Patti Smith, and it's just, these are people I love, and that I could do 40th anniversary and 50th, even 60th anniversary recaps of the albums and what they mean to us now, and how the reissues have added bonus tracks and what we know now that we didn't know then. And people, fans love the blog. They're just like, are you going to do a book? You have to do a book of this blog. So I'm so busy promoting the Yoko book right now, but my next thing would probably be to assemble this into some kind of, but it's massive, so I don't know how to do it, but yeah, got to do it somehow.
It's a shame in a way that it took so long for us to be able to actually do blogging, in a sense, because I started my own blogging in the early to mid 2000s. It's almost like there's almost a sense of release in a way for me with the blogging. In a way, it's like something that is almost it's almost impulsive that I have to do it. But
I had it all in notebooks. Every time I went to a show, I'd write down the set list when I got home. And I talked to Mick Ronson. He told me this about the production of this. And I had it all. So then I had to type it all up. And so finally, in 2002, I started the blog and kept it up from there. But it's finally, what I needed was to get it read. I had it all, just to get it to the right fans who care. A lot of people, I was at that show. Oh my God, I remember this. I did that. You're right. It just reminded me. And yeah, they just love, I have a humorous angle on the whole thing too, and throw that in there. And it's really fun.
You've made me think of something I should probably do now, because giving something away here. So I used to be in bands, and I'm a bass player primarily, but I play other instruments as well. And I used to have this habit, and a lot of the other members of my bands used to. I don't know whether they found it humorous or not, but whatever we did, so whenever we did a gig anywhere, played anywhere, or when we recorded anywhere, I took extensive notes of everything to do with these events. And I still have all my old journals of those gigs and the recording sessions. So perhaps I should pull them out and do something with them. I don't know, but who'd be interested in a band that didn't do much more than playing gigs in bars? And
I'm all about keeping information.
Got to play with the Pretenders. Pardon?
Oh, good. I always about keeping information. I collected everything there was on Yoko and everything she said about specific albums. And back then there was no internet, so you only got 1 or 2 or 3 interviews in a year. And I was able to, I kept it in chronological order, thank goodness. So when I said, I know she said this about this song. I want the exact quote, and I had to go get it. So that's why it's so packed with detail and insight and a lot of her own words. And that's what makes it interesting, I think. Details that nobody else has.
Yeah. Have you uploaded these somehow or another to the cloud, for instance, or to digital, so that these things are there then kept for posterity, then, for anybody or anything?
I haven't, but I mean, if somebody wants to do it, they're welcome to. I don't know how, but yeah, they could scan it or whatever. But I have folders and folders and folders of this stuff, and audio as well.
Wow, audio as well. That's brilliant. You see, there's a plethora of information there that people could do something with, I'm sure. But you've probably got more material, so you could do an expanded edition at some point.
I could probably, yeah, I've always wanted to expand it a little. Maybe the ebook will be expanded, who knows. But yeah, as soon as I retired, I wrote a book. I had it all, but it took me 2.5 years to assemble it. I didn't know I had a book. And so my boyfriend gave me software and he said, take all your Word documents, put them in here. So imagine if I did that in 2 years, what I could have done all my life if I didn't have to do the 9 to 5 nonsense.
Yes, I know what you mean exactly with that. So we're going all over the place with these bullet points. So now I'm going to go somewhere completely different. No, I'm going to carry on with that, what you've just said, take a thread from that. You've already mentioned the future with writing. So there must be artists for sure. There's some artists that you've done blogs about where you could possibly start and use some of that as maybe a guide to the next project, maybe.
Could be. I have to figure out how to do it. I have so many concert reviews from the 70s up until recently. I have so many album retrospectives of my favorite, a lot of Iggy and the Stooges, Alice Cooper, just everybody I love. It's mostly like glam heavy in a way, but a lot of Bowie. Now there's so many books on Bowie, but you can read my stories on Bowie and find things that is in none of those books. I every time I get a book, I'm like, oh, and I never read anything I don't know already. So I just should put it all together in one volume, and it should be an ebook because it's going to be massive. It's not going to carry around this Bible. So I'm going to have to organize that and put it in some kind of order.
Yeah, because I look at the blog posts that you do, and think that about that there's these artists that need looking at. I think in more. I think they need to be pushed a bit more in essence, or they're almost potentially. You'll always get the books about the Beatles, the solo Beatles, these people. The Rolling Stones are another one that you'll get books about, and all this. But there's all these artists that I think are overlooked. It's a bit like when I listen to Kristin's show, Rock and Roll Survivors, and she's talking with Patti Quattro. We'll come out with stories and anecdotes, and I'll think she needs to write a book, for crying out loud, because some of the people that she's been involved with, and you both cross with each other at points as well. So you've mentioned Iggy and the Stooges, and she knows the Stooges very well herself, and she knows the MC5 and all these people. So I just have these thoughts of, oh, you could do that, and I keep thinking that. But yeah, there are all these artists where I think if Patty did a book, for instance, that would bring to light these artists that I think are almost left by the wayside. You don't see people talking about the MC5 or about the Stooges that much, but they're important to the history of music, just as she probably knows a lot about the New York Dolls and all these. And yourself, you're looking at the Ian Hunters, Kraftwerk, who I think are one of the most important experimental groups out there. They're along the lines of Yellow Magic Orchestra and all these other artists, and I'll put them in the same thing as Yoko, as well as being experimental and that sort of style as well.
See, there are books about these bands and these people. There are books about Kraftwerk. There are books about the New York Dolls and hundreds of books about Bowie. But the thing is, what happens is Bowie passes away, and then every publishing house is, let's get assign a book about Bowie. And they sign it to a person who wasn't even born when Bowie put out his first record. And he has to research everything. And there are great books out there. Don't get me wrong. There are some really great, but you've got these researchers writing these biographies and things. And there's nothing like having a Patti Quattro who was there or in the scene, or me who was in the scene, but not as a musician, who has it right and hasn't read all these fabricated stories. I stay away from them because I don't want my memories tainted. I just want the truth and my own memories and how it really was. And that's the kind of things that fans want to read. I think it's not, I don't want to read a authorized, researched biography. I'd rather read something a fan wrote.
Yeah, I had the look and pleasure to speak with the record producer Shel Talmy recently for Toppermost, the Poppermost podcast that we do, where we're doing the English and the American charts. And so in that conversation, we were talking. David Bowie came up because he recorded and produced Bowie in the mid 1960s, in 1965, I think it was. And he said it was many years before. And it's interesting to get that sort of initial what they were like beforehand, in essence. And he was saying that the talent was there, but the world wasn't ready for it. And getting those little bits of information is always interesting. Like you said with Patty, when you listen to those bits, and yourself when I listen to you talking about Yoko Ono, I find that interesting because that's coming from somebody that was there at the time as well. And you get that of the time before all of the mania essentially covered all that and almost sanitized it in a sense.
Yeah, I used interviews of the time because a lot now a biography will come out and they'll interview people, mainly famous people, right? Yeah. So some of them just know them from a certain point onward. Some of them, even if they were back in the day, their memories are faded. I pull all the interviews I pulled are from the time. So it's all genuine. That's how I see it. No faded recollections that could be wrong or off kilter.
So you will, in your blog, you'll do almost a history of some artists, but then you'll also do reviews of some artists as well, of their products, the books, the albums, or anything else that they've done. And
yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I should just do it chronologically and not do just like the Alice Cooper chapter or the Bowie chapter, just like 1969, my first listenings of music, first seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 66, let's say. My first concert was 1972, John and Yoko at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And then whatever else happened that year, whatever, I sort of mix it up so it's not all heavy on one artist, and because the same people will have a theme running through the whole book, but I'm thinking
that's an interesting idea.
There'll be reviews, album retrospectives, all from that year and then the next year.
That's interesting because if you did it that way, okay, I'm following this nugget and it's a heck of a tangent to go on. But if you went that, then what you see there in that is chronologically, you see how music moves through those times or music changes, but also pop culture in general changes because films get different, and you as you yourself, you grow. I believe that pop culture and the music that you listen to, the books that you read, and these things throughout your life, they are they almost color who you become in a sense. You grow in a sense the same as pop culture grows if you're open to that.
Yeah, and I would look at it like firstly hearing, well, first was the Beatles, right? And the Stones, but then you're hearing a lot of singles. So I'm into like just British singles and orchestrated singles, the Elvis singles, all that was singles. Then it moved, have my little AM radio, and then it moves to FM radio. So I've got a bigger radio. Now I have albums, and there's album tracks and album, it's just like expanding all. So and then you got videos when MTV comes along, and now you're seeing the band. But I was always into the personalities of these people and the look and I wasn't into the guys in the plaid shirts strumming a guitar. You had to have personality. You had to be the New York Dolls. You had to be Ian Hunter. You had to be bigger than life. Just Mott the Hoople and Sparks. Sparks are my big thing. So they were just another realm entirely. So yeah, it's just the way. I'm still listening to that old stuff. I haven't found anything really that new that I love so much. So I'm just focusing on keeping those memories alive of all the bands I love. It's Queen, everybody.
Sorry, I'm wearing a Queen t-shirt right now.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yes. But and then with so how did it go then, going from doing the blog to coming up with the book? Did you seek out a publisher, and how did that all come to be?
Yeah, I made a couple of phone calls to authors and agents and lawyers. And they all said, whoa, this is, you're going to have problems, blah, 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 blah. It's a niche subject. It's an esoteric person. Oh, she's not liked. And you're going to have, I said, click. And I did the book myself.
Yep.
Oh, and you're going to have to cut it in half. That was the big one. No, kiss can't be more than 200 pages. Like, impossible.
Wow. I'm hoping that the popularity of the book, because it's sold well and it's a really popular book, I'm hoping that then when you come to the next book, maybe you'll get some interest from publishers. Have you thought of approaching any publishers now and saying to them, look, I've done really well, I've sold this, or are you just going to keep it in to yourself, self-publishing?
I don't know. I think I'd want to do it myself, and then they can look at it. I don't want them to say, okay, we'll take you on, but it has to be this, this, this. I'm gonna say, here it is. And then they can comment. And
Yeah.
I'm learning in publishing, very, very few books sell more than 1,000 copies. It is such a small percentage, 5% maybe. You can't make a living writing unless you're a famous author, or you're writing about a super famous person,
Yeah.
or you're Barbara Streisand. Even those books, they amazing in the first few weeks. They rise to the top of the chart, and then they disappear. So I don't know. I just rather have my own vision come to life than to be restricted. I'm not going to make a living on it. I'm retired at this point. I have my own little income, whatever. So I might as well be true to my vision.
Yep. And basically write what you want to write without people, an editor or somebody saying, oh, you need to write about this subject and this way, at least you'll be no, I'll write about what I want to write about.
Yeah, and it's well liked. It's not like I've gotten bad feedback. I've gotten it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Library and Archives now. It's getting honorable mention by all the Beatles people. Sirius XM, David Frick from Rolling Stone loves it. He's a big Yoko fan. Recommended by Olivia Harrison. Sean Lennon and Yoko, we love your book. Thank you for caring enough to be this meticulous. Their publicist, you might have heard of Elliot Mintz. He has a memoir coming out in October about John and Yoko and his life. He says it's a masterpiece. It's mandatory reading about a woman like no other. Dennis Mitchell, Breakfast of the Beatles, says pages and pages of wonder. Dan Richter, their friend and assistant. People are appreciating Yoko's cosmic consciousness. It just goes on and on. Beatle fan loves it. You can't argue, right?
Can't argue with that at all. So I feel bad that we're already at this stage, because we could carry on talking about this for a long, long time. But what advice then would you give for people who are looking for writing themselves in the future?
Unless you are Barbara Streisand, you should just, you're not gonna sell a lot of books. Yep. But if you're true to yourself, if you write from your heart, you have an interesting story, do it your way. Maybe have an editor look it over if you're not great with grammar, that kind of thing. Don't let them change your story. If you're writing fiction, I can't help you because that's not my thing. It's not my, I don't know how to help with that. But if you're writing a true story about yourself or about someone else, make sure you have insights in there. Make sure you have a sense of humor. Make sure it's all true. If you have to research too much, you're too far away from the subject, pick something you really know about and care about. And I would just say do it yourself and then have someone look at it. Don't go looking for an agent or a publisher when you have nothing, because then you'll never get started. You have too many opinions in your head about what you should be doing.
So going from there, then this is another good thing for writers as well, or potential writers to think about, is the promotional side. So what has the promotion of it been like, coming onto podcasts or onto other radio shows as well? How has that been of a journey?
It's been fantastic. I get to stay at home. I don't travel too well. I get sick wherever I go. But yeah, I get to do it from home. The hosts vary, most of them, all of them. They wouldn't have me on if they didn't appreciate Yoko, which is really nice. And they're all knowledgeable about her music, especially. Kristen took it to a whole other level, I think. She did 6 episodes with me, and then she did another 3, and we focused on a different aspect of Yoko's life, whether it was her art or her music or her time with John or her time in Japan, Japanese influence. So that was beautiful, and I got the most in-depth interviews from Kristen. I've been on with Rock and Roll Nightmares with Stacey Lane Wilson. She's an author herself. She has a lot of rock and roll related books, fiction and nonfiction. Her father was in the Ventures. She did a documentary on her father's band. It's fantastic. Cool. There's a Booked on Rock I've been on. There's one called Let It Roll. A lot of Beatles ones. Breakfast with the Beatles, Dennis Mitchell, Get Back to the Beatles, Ken Michaels Radio. A lot of Beatles podcasts. I'm going to be on BC The Beatles coming up. A great one is Tomorrow Never Knows with Ron Brown. Here, There, and Everywhere. The Sirius XM Yoko birthday special featured in my book. So it's been great. It's the most comfortable thing. And I'm doing my own social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm in a lot of groups. I'm getting a lot of great feedback. I've got reviewed in Goldmine and Mojo. Can't ask for anything more. I'm getting great reviews.
It sounds like a job in itself, doing the promotion.
It is. Well, I don't have much else to do right now. So especially it all started during COVID. So I was here anyway, doing what I could. And summer is hot out. I'm just in here doing what I can do. It's been written. It's an important book. It's not just Yoko. It's the 60s, the 70s, what was going on in those decades, jam-packed with history, musical history, political, otherwise. It's just fantastic story all around, all the characters. There's quotes in there from Pete Townsend, who is a fan of Yoko's work, and Phil Spector, Paul McCartney, Linda McCartney, all quotes from the time telling the story. It all fits together to make a perfect puzzle. It's amazing.
I'm so happy that you brought the book out. It's great. So how can people get hold of you, and where can they find the blog? And there's also a web page for the book as well.
So the blog, which is all my music stuff, is madelinex.com, MADELINE. And then the book's website is inyourmindbook.com. And the shop for the book is conceptualbooks.com. And you can get the hardcover version, which is this one signed by me, only at conceptualbooks.com. And the soft cover is here as well. And baby.conceptualbooks.com is another shop, and it's on Amazon. So overseas, you're better off on Amazon for shipping. But I want to mention the artist who did the cover illustration. Her name's Kat McInnes. She's from Australia. And I think it's just the most perfect depiction of Yoko, and Yoko loves it too.
That's lovely. That's a lovely picture. Yeah. Wish I could get the soft cover over here.
What do you have now?
Okay. I've got the hard cover here. The soft cover isn't available on Amazon in the UK for some reason. I don't know why.
It is. No, the hardcover is only available through me. This isn't on Amazon.
Have I got
the soft cover is?
I thought I've probably got mixed up with other books that I've got recently.
Yeah, you definitely, if you got it on Amazon, it's the soft.
It's the soft. Okay. Anyway, thank you for speaking with me today, Madeline.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you. You can find Pods Like Us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that's now called X, and Threads and TikTok as well, actually. And you can contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. There is a Patreon page as well if you look for Pods Like Us on there. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.